Today I'm in the mood to talk about modern dating and women's confidence to land the relationship they cherish and valuing themselves enough to know that their value proposition is the standard in which they should aspire and keep to truly understand the granular and intricate details of this issue. I have some data I want you to consider. It's estimated that only about 1/3 of women have the confidence in their dating skills necessary to approach relationships with a positive and upbeat mindset. At the same time, it's also noted that women are becoming increasingly selective in their dating expectations while also feeling emotionally disengaged from the dating process at large, according to my friends at the Institute for Family Studies. In a dating culture that promotes the use of apps, social media, and the endless array of options in today's dating pool, the question truly becomes, can you still find an authentic and genuine emotional and love connection? Or has dating become more complicated than ever before, leaving many women to ask themselves the question, is there a better way to approach love and relationships? Well, this week I'm joined by someone who can give us an authentic and emphatic answer to that very question. This week I'm joined by my friend Lauren Salaun. She's a dating expert, somatic, life, and success coach, transformational facilitator, professional speaker, and she's also the host of the podcast entitled the AMPLIFY podcast. Lauren is dedicated to helping women embody their feminine energy, heal their nervous system, reprogram their subconscious beliefs, which may be preventing them from securing and attracting the fulfilling and loving relationships they desire. And she joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Lauren, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm super excited to learn how you help women navigate the modern dating process. It's great to see you, my friend, and happy Thursday to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this and happy Thursday as well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Laura, the first question I have for you is a dating expert who helps women sort of lean into the more feminine side. What do you think most women need to know about finding success in today's modern dating world while also leaning into the femininity? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of women, I mean, so many things on this topic. I think a lot of women feel like they have to maybe be somebody that they're not, right? And so when it comes to dating and being successful in modern dating, it's not about becoming somebody completely different or like changing who you are or anything like that. I think that so many women these days are feeling so many different things about dating. They're feeling like they're hitting dead ends with dating, like they're not meeting the kinds of people that they want, whatever it is. But also a lot of women, and a lot of the women that I work with, and I used to kind of be this kind of woman as well, right? They are ambitious, they're focused on their careers, or maybe they run businesses and stuff like that. And so they've gotten so used to operating in a certain way that can tend to cause them to be in their masculine energy a lot, and which then has some, negative consequences when it comes to their dating lives. So all that to say, right, it might, a woman hearing that might be like, oh well, but that's how I am, so you're saying I have to like completely change how I am and how I operate and stuff like that. No, it's about learning how to tap into that feminine side of you, that more feminine energy side, the part of you that hasn't had to be the like competitive go-getter, all of that, so that you can find that balance.
Yeah, and I do think you'll help women, heal their subconscious mind and lean into their feminine energy, as I said. So I'm curious to ask you about, working to regulate the nervous system to attract the type of man or partner women desire. What do you think is the key there, my friend?
Yeah, so a lot of, I'm going to use the example of like a woman who's been living in her masculine energy for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
That likely happens. It happens for a lot of reasons. We live in a very dominantly masculine energy world, and where in order to take care of yourself, pay your own bills, like all that kind of stuff, be successful in your career, typically masculine energy traits help you be successful at those things, or are required for those sorts of things. So a lot of women are encouraged to be very much in their masculine energy just from like society standpoint, right? But then there are also things like, if you've experienced trauma or, mistreatment and things like that, that can cause a woman to kind of put up her guard, and where she then might also lean more into her masculine energy for that reason. And so there's a lot of those, like when it comes to doing this somatic work and the subconscious reprogramming around that, it's a lot about a woman learning how to feel safe within her own body, feel safe, like letting her guard down, and letting go of a lot of those those like protective patterns, if you will, to really like surrender into the version of herself that feels most authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lauren, I'm also curious to ask you about, so many people go into dating as a process with a checklist instead of
Mm.
trying to authentically get to know someone. So how do you think we can effectively balance having, values and principles that you want in a person, but also, getting to know them on an authentic level. So how can we balance between the checklist and authenticity, my friend?
Absolutely. It's such a good question. Yeah, I think it's something that I tell people all the time. Now, this, whether you're a man or a woman, this is relevant. You should know when you're dating, okay, what kind of relationship are you looking for? Are you looking just to kind of date? Maybe you've been in a relationship for a long time and you just kind of want to date, but have it be maybe more low key. Or are you dating for marriage? Or are you dating for a serious relationship, right? Like knowing what you want, what are you available for, what are you wanting. So that's really, really important to know that and to have clarity for yourself with that. But then also I say, like, and then you also should know very clearly what kind of person you want to be with. And that doesn't mean getting so specific to where you're like, they must have this color hair and this color eyes and be this tall and da, 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 right? Like it's not about getting so into the details and being so rigid about it, but knowing like, okay, what are the qualities and characteristics and like personality traits, or like those sorts of things, knowing those things about the kind of partner that you want. Like what is that list? So on a certain level, I do think like, yeah, you should have some sort of list. It should be more about character than like traits, like, physical traits and things like that, more about someone's internal character. But then knowing, okay, what are my must haves? What are my nice to haves? and what are my like deal breakers, right? So must haves, it's like, okay, let's say you want to have get married and have children. So that
Mm-hmm.
is a requirement for you. So if you go on a date with somebody and they very clearly, do not want to have kids, do not want to ever get married, that's a disqualifier, right? So knowing, okay, what are my must haves, XYZ things that this person has to have, right? So those are things that you do want, you don't want it to be like an interview that you're going through like this list. Okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? But knowing for yourself, like, okay, what are the requirements for a partner, right? Like for me, what are my requirements in a partner? And you do want to make sure that you're using your time and energy effectively to determine the answers to those questions, right? Like, and to get that information so that neither of you waste time on the connection. Again, there's a balance of how to have those conversations, when to ask certain things and stuff like that, so that it feels natural and authentic. You're not just on a first date running through your list of all the things, but it's so key to know what are those non-negotiables for you, what are the things that are optional but would be nice, and then what are the things that are automatic deal breakers. Like, for me, for example, somebody who smokes cigarettes, that would be an automatic deal breaker, right? Yeah. So knowing, okay, what are the automatic disqualifiers, what are the must-haves, like all of that. So it's that balance of, you don't want to be too rigid, right? Because I think a lot of people these days, there's a lot of the nice to haves that are on people's must have list. Like a lot of women, oh, he must be
Mm-hmm.
6 feet tall, or he can't be bald, like these sorts of things. When it's like, okay, like I would say those are nice to haves, right? Like, because a man really doesn't have that much control over his height or his hairline, if any at all. And neither of those things really dictate what his character is like and how he's going to treat you 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, right? And so knowing what should be on the must have list, the required list, and what should be on the, would be nice list.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lord, one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you today is one of the things that frustrates me on the dating scene is when I hear women or men say if I could only get in a relationship with someone, I could change them, or I can tolerate something, but I'm aiming to change this person, and I think that is a misguided approach to dating. So many people have flaws, and we work. It's my belief that you can work to and help people improve or see things from a different perspective. But I think it's a misguided notion to say if I can only get him to see things this way, I can make him change. And I'm wondering your thoughts behind that notion as well.
Yeah, that is such a good one, because that's a big thing. And I think that idea keeps a lot of people in bad relationships, or in relationships too long that they should move away from. And so with that, like a few thoughts on that, because for one, I think that social media has us all thinking, or not all, but a lot of people thinking that they should expect or look for perfection, right? Like, well, if he does XYZ, he's canceled, right? Like that sort of thing, which sure, there are certain things that I think should be immediate like deal breakers, but a few things with this. One, like you said, yes, we are all works in progress. Like nobody should be expected to be 100% like healed, or like just 100% at the top of every single thing, right? And so knowing like, okay, we're all growing, we're all like learning all the time. And I think one of the most important things is that you see, if this is important to you, at least it's important for me, but to be with somebody that prioritizes growth and evolution and everything like that, somebody who doesn't want to just stay like stuck in their ways forever and stagnant. And so that's important, to be with somebody who's committed to growth and self-improvement, I think. And realizing that like you shouldn't expect, your partner to be perfect or always say or do the right thing in every situation. Not right as in like morally right, but like do the thing that you want, right? Like they're going to make mistakes. They're going to mess up every once in a while. And so to have grace for that. But the flip side of this is, because that's the like nuanced, balanced perspective about it. But the flip side is, yes, a lot of people end up being in relationships where they're like, oh, well, everything's great except XYZ or accept this, or if I could just get this to change. And the thing about that is, you should not, man or woman, you should not be in a relationship with somebody where you are hoping that some major thing changes in order for you to be okay being in the relationship. Because what you should ask yourself instead is, if this never changed, would I be okay with it for the rest of my life? If, you're looking for the rest of your life, right? Would I be, if this never changed, if he never did this differently, or if she never changed this about herself, would I be all right with that? That's the better question to be asking yourself, right? Because a lot of time when somebody shows you who they are, you should believe them, right? When somebody is showing you their actions, you should take that very, very seriously. That doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement, change, growth, anything like that. But you should not be banking on somebody to change or trying to change someone either. Like a great way to get somebody to like resent you and the relationship is like trying to make them change. Now, again, that's different than encouraging each other to grow. That's a very different experience and feeling. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're like in a relationship, you're like, oh, he's perfect, except I just really hate this. Or he's just like the way he handles conflict or whatever it is, like I just can't do that. And so I'm just hoping if I can just like convince him of XYZ, then this will change and everything will be better. If that's what you're waiting on, like you're likely setting yourself up for disappointment. And so, my best advice in this situation, if there are things that you're looking to change, yes, have the conversations. You should be able to have conversations with your partner or the person you're dating in a mature way about things that bother you or things that make you uncomfortable or hurt your feelings. But if you see no changed behavior, that's the message, right? That you need to take that very seriously. And overall, you should be trying to accept somebody for how they are. That doesn't mean you don't hold them to a high standard and you don't want their continued growth and evolution and to grow together with them. But hoping that somebody will change is setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah, and I know that Lauren, you're passionate about helping women sort of exit their boss babe or hustle culture mentality when it comes to dating, and I'm wondering your thoughts on why this is so important to you. How do you help women do that, and also, I believe it's important for women to know their own value and setting their own standard of expectations. So talk to me about on helping women sort of get out of their boss babe culture, but also knowing their value when it comes to dating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I am very passionate about that because I was on the other side of it. I, you know, lived most of my life very stuck in my masculine energy, which of course comes with a lot of great outcomes, results, right? Like great job, good career, well respected, like great resume, like all these achievements, accolades, all this kind of stuff, like all of that, good at so many things, right? Like that kind of like more masculine focused energy. And the downside of that, at least in my life and what I see with so many women, is that I then, because I was very in my masculine energy, I attracted a partner who was very in his feminine energy. And because we complemented one another, right? And I ended up getting a divorce. And that's something that, and from that process, or even during my marriage at the time, I started doing the inner work on myself. I had no idea it was about masculine and feminine energy when I started doing this personal growth, but I was doing work about inner work around my self-worth and around stopping being a people pleaser and like getting overcoming overachieving and things like that. That was a lot of the work that I was doing, and part of that work also ended up being learning how to find balance in my masculine and feminine energy. And as I did a lot of that healing, realized there was a big misalignment in my relationship at the time. And so I ended up getting a divorce. And part of why I'm so passionate about this work is because I want to help women avoid that kind of outcome. I want to help women because I think that most women, I know this for myself, our default, even if we're very good at being in our masculine, which I'm not saying you should only be in your feminine energy, that's not how things work, but I think so many women want to be more comfortable in their feminine energy, and that for so many women our default is to be mostly in our feminine energy. And when we are stuck in that masculine energy space, it creates a lot of stress, a lot of misalignment in our lives. And so yeah, so I want to help women avoid that. And so some of the things that we do, some of the ways to balance that out, right, is we do a lot of work around self-worth. Because a lot of women, this is how I used to be, and a lot of women who might be resonating with this, this probably sounds familiar, is a lot of them get their validation through what they're doing, right? Like through
Mm-hmm.
how important they are at their job or through their accomplishments or those sorts of things. And so working on self-worth to feel worthy just because of who you are, not attached to what it looks like on the outside, not attached to how good or smart people think you are, right? Like having that self-worth be innately felt and believed. And then working on things like detaching from people pleasing, from overachieving, from the need to be in control, because a lot of the women that I work with, right, there is a strong desire to be in control because it creates a sense of safety, even if these women don't seem like they're controlling, right? And so those are a lot of the things we work on. But then another one of the biggest ones is like learning how to trust, like to reconnect with your body, with your senses, with your emotions more, and like get out of your head and more back into your body and trust your intuition. So those are it's there's a lot of different layers to it, but that's just a bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lauren, I'm curious to get your thoughts on these findings from Forbes because they reported this year that they did a survey on the health of dating for women across America, and they found that 55% of women say they feel positive about the dating experience, while 45% of women feel indifferent or negative about the entire process or the experience. So, what do those numbers tell you about the current state of modern dating and women's approach to even going through the entire process, my friend? So, what do you think of those findings at first blush, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that it's more than half who feel like it's positive because I think it is more positive than a lot of people think. It does make me feel a little sad for nearly half, right? 45% who
Yeah.
feel indifferent or negative. I would be curious what the indifferent versus negative group is, right? Because feeling neutral or indifferent is a little different than negative, but nearly half feeling indifferent or negative, that like is sad, I think. That's
Yeah.
and so what that tells me is one, I'm happy that it's more than at least more than half that feel good about it. But then I also, I think it says a lot about where we are as men and women in the world these days. But I think there is so much with like social media and stuff that I think really poison, like social media, reality TV, like all this kind of stuff that's like quote unquote real but not real, like it's very fake, all that stuff. And I think it puts very black and white ideas of how dating's supposed to look in people's minds. I think it puts unrealistic expectations on people. I think because again, like I kind of mentioned before, I think so many people, if you're taking dating advice on social media, which I give dating advice on social media, but if you're listening to that, like so much of it, or at least the stuff that often goes really viral or people with big followings, it's the people who are putting out more extreme perspectives, right? Whether it's, kind of red pill men or like the pink pill women, right? Where it's very all or nothing, very black and white. And I don't think that's good advice to listen to. People who are putting out very all or nothing perspectives, right? And so that kind of, when people consume a lot of that kind of information, it gives them a pretty like bleak outlook toward things, and an outlook I think that's not actually that realistic for what is happening dominantly in the world. Not to say that some of those perspectives aren't true, right? Sometimes they are, and sometimes like on an anecdotal basis they are, but I think a big reason for a lot of this is just like social media warps things so much,
Mm-hmm.
and puts a lot of unrealistic expectations, unrealistic standards even, and stuff like that. And people like putting out kind of like hot take advice without giving you the full picture, or people showing like, oh, look at, like, showing quote unquote what their relationship is like, and still, not showing the whole picture, things like that. I think what people are seeing on social media is very misleading, and it leads people down these like echo chambers that both give them unrealistic expectations, plant pretty like ideas and beliefs that aren't going to help them in the long run, and kind of perpetuate this like all or nothing kind of mindset about dating.
Yeah, and to that point, I wanted to follow up by a study I found preparing for this from the podcast people who run Focus on the Family. They did a study that found that about one third of women, young adults and young women feel confident about their ability to read social cues, and their overall dating confidence. And they talk about things like being influenced by social media and not really giving the authentic dating process a fair shake. So what did they tell you that only about one third of younger women are confident in their ability to approach the dating scene? And how do you think we can boost women's confidence when it comes to dating, my friend?
Yeah. Okay. So it was one in three are confident.
One
Is
third,
the
yeah, yeah,
one
one
third?
third,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Which I think is great. And I think it's interesting because I'd be curious like what the numbers are for men on that, and similarly I'd be curious with the previous statistic from Forbes how what men's outlook on dating is like, if they feel
Mm-hmm.
positive, indifferent, negative. And yeah, a third of women feel confident about dating. Like, I love that because I would want to see that be higher, but I think again, like there's a lot of noise to sift through on social media, and that's where a lot of people are getting their information from and stuff like that. But I also think that there is a shift away from, like, I think there is growing media literacy, or I would hope at least. I think people are starting to really crave, people are craving more authenticity. People are looking for more nuanced perspectives. And so I think the more that women listen to balanced perspectives, nuanced perspectives, the more that not just women, but men and women are taking advice from people who have healthy, balanced perspectives about the opposite sex, about dating, I think the more confident both sides will be, and the better like, outcomes and like results everyone is going to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lauren, I want you to take me back to 2020 because I know that was the year your PR firm or agency finally gained some traction and momentum. And I know that COVID was a big, shifter for that momentum. And I know that you went through period of your life where you didn't recognize the patterns in your own life that were leading to some discouragement when it comes to dating and your relationships and all the rest of it. So tell me about 2020 and why it was such an impactful time in your life, my
Yeah.
friend.
Absolutely. So I think everybody probably had some major shifts in their lives during 2020, right? So many things got flipped on its head, and it was such a season to really reevaluate what you were prioritizing and how you were living your life, right? And for me, I had kind of already mentioned about like, I was in this big journey of self growth and like doing a lot of inner work and healing, especially around my self-worth, around being a people pleaser, perfectionist, overachiever, all of that kind of stuff. And the other layer of that being really learning how to be more in my feminine energy in a healthy way and like let go of needing to be in my masculine energy all the time. So I was in that growth cycle already. And as I mentioned at the time, I was also married and COVID happened and I had just bought a house. And so my ex-husband and I were living in the house and everything, like and so that's like, this big milestone and stuff like that. And I'm looking around and thinking, oh, wow, like, okay, I have this beautiful home in this beautiful neighborhood. Like, I'm married, like all these things that are supposed to be happening are falling into place the way that they're quote unquote supposed to. And yet I felt like something was very, very much like wrong or misaligned. Like something big was out of alignment. There was something big missing. And my ex-husband and I had been going through some problems and dealing with some stuff for a couple years already at that point. And but I didn't think, I wasn't thinking about divorce and things like that. And so when COVID happened, and like you mentioned, my one of my businesses really blew up and took off in a way that I had been like hoping for, praying for, working really hard for a long time. And so, I'm in this beautiful home. I'm married. I'm living in a great neighborhood. My business is really taking off. Like all these things are falling into place. But then I'm like, but something is wrong, and realized, okay, no, like the marriage, the relationship is still not right, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that on a very fundamental level, there was just such a mismatch and such a misalignment. And so that was, I in the span of like within the same couple of months, COVID happened, that business, blew up really big. I decided to get a divorce. Like so many things happened very, very fast in like a 2 month span that was like so intense and so crazy, but also like, like kind of cracked me wide open to like do a bunch of really deep healing work.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I wanted to also talk to you about is why do you think successful and high achieving women struggle to attract a masculine partner that they desire? Because I see this sometimes in my parents' marriage and other people that are in relationships. Sometimes they want to prove a point instead of being right because in their professional life, they're used to being in a position of leadership, and sometimes it's important to peel back the onion to really understand who you are as a person, the type of person you want to date, but also allowing them to be their authentic self without always being hyper focused on judging them, as we were talking about earlier. So, why do you think so many women struggle to attract the masculine man they desire, my friend?
Yeah, well, to a bit of what I've been saying already is like these women who are high achieving, who have a lot going for them, might have like really robust social lives and like be confident. Like, you might look at these women and be like, oh my gosh, she's checking every single box. But why a lot of these women who are the high achiever, maybe owns her own business or just really successful in her career and stuff like that, they struggle to meet a masculine man because they're leading with their masculine energy. And so if we think about, right, like we think about magnets, like it's that idea of opposites attract. Well, there's a lot of truth in that. Like, yes, you're going to attract someone that you have shared values with and stuff like that. But when it comes to energy and like the energetic blueprint, if you will, that you're leading with and that you're going out into the world with, you're going to attract your counterpart. And so if a woman is very much in her masculine energy and that's how she's showing up in the world. And now when I say that, that doesn't mean like, a woman can on appearance look very feminine and still be very in her masculine energy. It's not about like, it's not a looks thing at all. It's kind of internal energetic thing. And so these high achieving women are often so used to being in their masculine energy and struggle with or don't even know how to be in their feminine energy. And so they bring that masculine energy into their dating, into their relationships, and then end up often attracting, attracting men who are in their feminine energy or men who are in their unhealthy masculine energy instead of a more healthy masculine energy man, because they're just going to repel those healthy men, healthy masculine energy men.
Yeah, I'm going to combine my next two questions because they're interconnected. You talk a lot about the science of magnetism and the nervous system as we talk about it, and regulation and subconscious and all the rest of reprogramming. And I wanted to couple that question, the science of magnetism, with also asking you about, the attachment theory of, which can also lead people to seek, constant reassurance.
Yeah.
And, sometimes they struggle to find an objective view of dating. So I'm curious to ask you about your perspective on the attachment theory and the importance of the science of magnetism, my friend.
Yeah. So when I'm talking about magnetism and stuff like that, right, we often are going to attract the energy that we're putting out into the world, and not getting like too like woo or weird or anything with it. But right, if you notice, like if I'm going through my life in an energy of gratitude and I'm focusing on gratitude and being grateful for everything in my life, I'm going to attract more positive experiences because that's my energy that I'm putting out there, right? And I'm going to likely and not have as much like attention or awareness to the things that don't inspire gratitude. And so that our energetic frame that we're putting out into the world is so, so important. And so similarly, right, if I am feeling so when we talk about magnetism and what makes you more magnetic, the things that make you really, really magnetic are being your authentic self. So like living in the most kind of like aligned and integrous state for you, right? So if you are living in accordance with your values, with your morals and stuff like that, if you are living in a way that makes you happy and brings joy to your life, and again, like I said, in alignment with your values, and so you're moving in the direction like your goals, your vision for your life, all of that anchored in your values, and you're thinking along those lines, you're acting in those lines, that sort of thing, like you are going to put out a very like high vibration, if you will, again, without getting too like in the woo. And then you become more magnetic to other people who are living at a high level, right? Do you become more magnetic to opportunities, things like that, when you're living in alignment because your energy is focused and aligned with what matters to you, what brings you joy, what fulfills you, all of that. And then remind me again, the part two of your question.
The attachment theory.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So attachment, I love attachment theory and stuff like that. And I find it so fascinating and a really, really helpful tool, if you will, or framework to understand yourself and to understand yourself in relationships. And the great thing about attachment theory and attachment styles is that you can do the inner work to heal your attachment style, right? So, not everyone has a secure attachment. And so, some of the most common, I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but like the breakdown of all of them. But when it comes to magnetism and things like that. So if we think about somebody who has an anxious attachment style, right? They tend to run more anxious, more kind of needy, quote unquote, more they're needing reassurance, all this kind of stuff. Because somebody with an anxious attachment style, they're afraid of losing love. They're afraid of being abandoned. They're afraid of being left alone. And so they tend to lean more hot, if you will, or anxious, right? They tend to lean more in to kind of like keep tabs on, like, oh my gosh, your energy, your tone sounded different? What's wrong? Is everything okay? Right? They're trying to manage every little thing because they don't want that person to leave and to abandon them. And so they compensate by running anxious. And now somebody with an avoidant attachment style is the opposite of the anxious, which tends to run like cool, right? They tend to disconnect and push back because one of their core fears is to lose freedom and to like kind of be like smothered, if you will. And so the anxious person is like, I'm terrified of being left and abandoned, while the avoidant one is like, well, I'm terrified of being like smothered and losing my freedom and independence. And so you can see how, when we go back to the opposites attract thing, a lot of anxious people and avoidant people will find themselves together because by being in a relationship together, they fulfill each other's deepest fears, right? Because our ego is, we're getting into like a lot of the really like sciencey kind of nerdy stuff about it, which I love, but the ego is like looking for validation a lot of the time. So if you have a deep belief that, if you're the anxious one and you have a deep belief that, well, everybody is going to abandon me. That's what love's like. I have to be really vigilant and really just like, like almost controlling and just hyper vigilant of everything because I don't want to be abandoned. Then you're going to find yourselves, until you do the healing work, you're going to find yourself in situations that prove that to be true. Just like the avoidant, right? If their big fear is losing their freedom, being smothered, that sort of thing, they're going to find themselves in a situation where that becomes true, being smothered, losing their freedom. And so a lot of times you'll see anxious and avoidance being attracted to one another because they share that that mirror image kind of like programming with their attachment style. And again, like I mentioned a moment ago, the good news is you can do a lot of work to heal that. Like my attachment style, I would say now, very secure, or mostly secure. But I used to be fearful avoidant, which is a combination, or otherwise known as disorganized, which is a combination of anxious and avoidant. So I would do both, which is like really chaotic. And so, but the great thing is that like with a lot of, like I said, somatic healing, the nervous system reprogramming, like all that kind of stuff, I've gotten to a place where I'm dominantly secure, I would say, right? But until you kind of do the work to heal those things, you'll attract people and experiences into your life that touch on those triggers a lot.
Yeah, and I've got two questions left for you, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you about your podcast. And before I ask you my next question, I'll give you a little bit of background for myself. So, Lauren, I'm 37, and I have cerebral palsy, and dating with a disability is an interesting endeavor. So, and I know you help women who are neurodivergent navigate the dating process and the dating scene. So, talk to me about neurodivergent women, helping them navigate the dating scene and the principles or desires that neurodivergent women often have when it comes to dating. My friend, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'll preface by saying I'm not an expert in neurodivergence or anything like that. So that's a lot of this has come from my own lived experience as someone who's neurodivergent, and interestingly enough, like looking around and being like, oh, most of my friends are, right, because you just sort of naturally kind of have found each other throughout our lives, and then so many of my clients who've resonated with me happen to also be neurodivergent, not all by any means, but a lot, and so a lot of the challenges that neurodivergent women face, and obviously it can look very different, and I will say too, another kind of disclaimer is I've mainly worked with very high functioning. Oh, well, I've only worked with the women, neurodivergent women that I've worked with have all been very, very high functioning. And so I, like I said, not an expert in neurodivergence or anything like that. But a lot of the women that I work with who are neurodivergent, some of the similarities that we see are the like long-term masking, right? Like, okay, I have to, in order to be accepted or be, appear quote unquote normal, I have to do this, I have to do that. So years of masking that it leads to a lot of burnout and a lot of deep exhaustion. And so helping women show up, like not have to mask all the time and feel really comfortable being their authentic selves, being more themselves and comfortable in their own skin. A lot of neurodivergent women will overcompensate, right? Or like really try to prove that they're enough. So we have that like self-worth struggle, the overachieving struggle, the perfectionist stuff. And another thing too, and again, all of these are wrapped up in people pleasing, right? The burnout, rejection sensitivity, all of that, and even like difficulty trusting themselves in relationships. And one of the big things too that a lot of neurodivergent women experience is big emotions, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
big emotions. I mean, that's something that a lot of women experience in general, but especially neurodivergent women, right? There's rejection sensitivity dysphoria, where any sort of, often any sort of criticism or rejection or an idea of rejection can feel very debilitating. There can be an overlap of PMDD, which is like a very exaggerated version of PMS that a lot of neurodivergent women can also experience, not all. And so there's often a lot more work to do on nervous system regulation and emotional regulation and emotional discipline, because a lot of neurodivergent women, they feel things so big. And so it's working on that so that it becomes really, really manageable as well, which can look a lot of different ways, right? Like different boundaries, how to communicate, like all like support system, all of that. Another thing that's interesting with neurodivergent women, and this isn't, I don't think this is exclusive to neurodivergent women, but a lot of neurodivergent women will experience what's called limerence, which is like a very heightened, almost obsessive, like crush kind of state where it's like a hyper fixation on somebody, but it's way more about chasing the dopamine than it is about the person. And so that's something too that I've done a lot of work with women on, is like the pacing in a relationship as well. And so again, going to that emotional regulation, that nervous system regulation, because a lot of women who are neurodivergent can meet somebody and in the beginning get so excited and oh my gosh, like just like having all these butterflies and just so excited, right? And there's nothing wrong with being excited about somebody and excited about dating somebody new, but knowing that, okay, sometimes as neurodivergent women, our minds are getting way more wrapped up in the idea of somebody and then the dopamine that we're getting from the idea of that, rather than the reality of what's happening. So it's just a lot more regulation and management and discipline and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Lauren, I'm curious to end our conversation by asking you about your podcast, Amplify, where you talk to people about dating and personal growth, and you really dive into those conversations about, dating, our mindset through it in life. And I also want to couple that by asking you about your own personal and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined, my friend.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. So my podcast, which I gotta confess, it was supposed to come back this month in June, but being that it's June 25th, I don't think it will be back until July, but I've already got, so many episodes planned that I will be recording literally this weekend. So, yeah, so my podcast Amplify is very much about it's about personal growth, and it's about feminine embodiment, self-mastery, and really designed for women, but I know a lot of men listen to it as well, but really on how to become the person that you're meant to be. I talk about dating, relationships, nervous system healing, subconscious reprogramming, femininity, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, personal growth. I'll talk about faith based topics as well in there. And really, my goal with it is to help everyone who listens to it create a really deeply aligned, magnetic, and fulfilling life. And so yeah, so I have so much fun with the show. It I had taken a little break with it, but it will be back this summer. And my legacy that I want to leave, I really, it's interesting because I think of myself still as quite young and very like still in the beginning chapters of life. Even though I have, considerable experience, I'm like, wow, I've lived a very, very full life so far. And my goal is to help people to live in to live the life that God has like envisioned for them, right? And so whatever that looks like, because it's unique for each person. And so really like encouraging, inspiring, helping people to live as their like the person that they're created to be and live that life that God has in store for them. Because I think that whatever we can imagine, I think the plan that God has for us is like always going to be so much better than what our minds can envision. And so my goal is to help people, take some steps closer to whatever that life is supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, my friend, tell me if people want to get connected with you and all the good work that you're doing, what's the best way they can do that, my friend?
Absolutely. You can find me online at laurensalaun.com. My last name is Salaun. I'm also at Lauren Salaun on Instagram and TikTok. And then, as Kevin mentioned, my podcast is Amplify with Lauren, and you can find it on iTunes and Spotify and YouTube.
Fabulous, my friend. Well, as someone who really enjoys the art of human connection and human behavior, I really enjoyed this conversation about dating women and everything in between. And I want to thank you for giving women the empowerment and confidence that they need to re-enter or enter the dating scene, my friend. I think you're doing great work, and it was a privilege to engage in conversation with you, and I want to thank you for being here, my friend. It's most appreciated.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.